let's welcome in now senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell. And Greg, the roster's set. I don't know if you really took a look at any of that, but looking at the Bucs game, the final preseason game, did you feel like there was anybody that really kind of cemented themselves with a spot on the roster with their performance in that game?
It's funny. I kind of felt like the roster, because of the draft picks, would likely be set on defense, and clearly it was a defensive draft more than an offensive draft. Um, I know that they were really looking to see Cole Bishop, who I think has to be an important piece of this defense. And it's hard to know. I guess he played 2 or 3 series, and um, I think the strength of his game, obviously, he plays on the back end, and you have to in the Buffalo defense at times, but I think he's a better player playing downhill, and I think you saw that. Um, Obviously, Deion Walker had some really good snaps in that game.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the big question, given that there are three rookie defensive linemen, the second, third, and fourth round picks in Sanders, Jackson, and Walker. What I'm most curious about, and I don't know if you guys have any feel for that, is what kind of snaps they might get in the regular season. That's something that I'm really fascinated to see, because obviously a second round pick, a third, those are not throwaway picks. So I'm really curious to see how they map out playing time. I'm really curious to see when the season starts, and obviously you've got that Sunday night game where you're facing a very active, mobile quarterback. How many snaps Joey Bosa will get? I think there's a lot of things. These are not questions in my mind. Not things I'm worried about. I'm just curious about. And I'm
Right.
sure you guys
Yeah.
are as well. And we'll obviously talk more about the game itself next week. But there are three rookie defensive linemen. When you draft guys where they drafted them, I think you expect those guys to play meaningful snaps. And I know that's a relative term, and that could be game specific and opponent specific. But you're not drafting those guys at where they did for those guys not to play at all.
Well, it seems like they're going to find out early because of the Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi's suspensions. You figure
Yeah.
those two guys would probably be on the roster in a normal year, but with them being suspended, certainly those young guys are going to have to contribute early. I mean, there's just no way around it. The numbers, you look at it, there's nobody else to play,
Yeah.
particularly, and
No.
the Bills are going to
Yeah.
rotate.
No, and that's what they do. So that's why I'm really curious. And we'll see when. Well, I guess our Hoyt and Ogunjobi, is that 6 games
Yes, 6.
for both, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, you're talking about a meaningful number of games, and I'm not suggesting that when those guys come back that they're not going to play. Obviously, they will, but it'll take a little time to work back in, and how that will then impact the rotation. And I guess much of that would depend on how the rookies play. I mean, if T.J. Sanders and Deion Walker, talking about Ogunjobi, for instance, if they play meaningful snaps and play well, it's sometimes it's hard just to throw a guy in week 7 or and
Yeah.
say, okay, you're going to play a lot of snaps now if other guys are playing well.
I know we've already talked to you a couple of times through the course of the preseason about Deion Walker, but he seems to be making strides with his game each time he's out on the field. I know you're not thrilled
Yeah.
with his pad level. His pad level didn't mean a hill of beans in that game. I mean, he's throwing guards aside
No.
like stuffed animals and,
Well,
making plays.
no, I mean, well, the thing with him is he is. I remember, and I probably told you guys this, but I did him in the summer of 2024 with his 2023 tape,
Yep.
and he had the look, because he's so big and so athletic. He had the look of a first round player. And again, he may be one of those guys, just because of his height, that never always plays with good pad level, exactly what you want, because he's just so tall. But he's such a good athlete. He's really light on his feet. He's strong. Every other trait he really has. So the question is, can he overcome the fact that, and Steve knows this exceptionally well, no matter how big and strong or athletic you are, if you do stand up too often, that negatively impacts all of that. If he can at least modify it, Brownie, to the point where it's not a big factor, he's got a lot of traits to him. There's a lot in his body.
All right, I know that in large measure there's a pecking order when it comes to quarterbacks, and we watched Mitch Trubisky and Mike White have it out over the first couple of football games, and then
Yeah.
Shane Buechele comes in, and really has a nice game against Tampa Bay. I mean, a really good game. What do you make of that, and how does that? I mean, if you've seen this, how does this affect the evaluation process? Certainly, Buechele, the playing field was tilted a little bit more in his favor than it was for Trubisky or White.
You know, I to be honest with you, Steve, I always struggle with watching guys play in the preseason games because, I've been fortunate to be at training camps. And, you guys know this, you're around. But obviously, coaches want to see a player play well in the game. But as you guys know, they're with these guys every single day. These guys get in at 6:37 in the morning. They're there till 7 at night. They're in meetings. The coaches get to know them exceptionally well. There's a lot of football talk all day long. I mean, that's what these guys do. So I'm not going to sit here and say the games don't matter. Of course they do. You want to see a player execute and perform well, whatever it is he is asked to do, regardless of who the opposition is. It's always easy to say, oh, well, he's playing against the second or third team or whatever, or guys who aren't going to be on the opponent's roster. But they're looking for execution, and that's what they're looking for. They want to see players execute what they're asked to execute. But in many ways, the games themselves are somewhat secondary to the day-to-day, how these guys react to everything that's thrown at them. I've been fortunate to sit in meetings, quarterback meetings at training camp in my career, and, where they just throw out tests like, okay, what's the protection? What's the front? What's this? What's that? So much of that is more important than the game itself. Buechele's a guy that, he's probably, I mean, not probably, he is a backup type in the league. The question is he going to be around for the Bills? I mean, right now, Trubisky's the backup. Don't they only have 2 on the active roster as we speak right now?
We're anticipating Buechele will be on the practice squad. That's our anticipation.
Yeah.
So let's take that a step further, because I think Trubisky, this training camp, performed better than he did last year when he first came back from Pittsburgh in his second stint with the Bills. I felt his ball velocity was better. I felt his second reaction playmaking was better. It's almost like he rediscovered his mobility, which was such an attractive trait of his that made him such a high draft pick to begin with. Yeah. And then he came here, and some of that went away, especially when he came back to the team from Pittsburgh last year. And to see him utilizing his mobility and making second reaction throws, and not only that, making his arm velocity and passing velocity looked improved also. And then we saw on Hard Knocks last night that he was working with the biometric guy, and that was confirmed based on some of the numbers they were spitting out on the show last night. I'm encouraged. Not that I ever want to see him on the field this season, Greg, but what did you see some of those same things from him?
Well, I think that you made a great point. I think one of the things that was attractive about him when he came out was that he was a good athlete, and he's got good size and he's a good athlete. He'll always have one limitation as a thrower, that is he's never going to get over, because that's the way he throws, and that's he's a locked front leg thrower. So at some point, the velocity, it could reach a certain level and it'll stop, and that's just the way he throws the ball. There are certain quarterbacks that have been like that. Alex Smith was a locked front leg thrower, and that's why, at a certain point the velocity stops. The point is if you have to play with him, and you certainly hope not. And history, you never know what the future holds, what tomorrow brings. But obviously, Josh Allen, I don't think he's missed any time since he's been the starting quarterback. But you wonder if parts of the offense would have to be different. I mean, they've sort of advanced under Joe Brady to very much of a rhythmic passing game, which obviously Trubisky can execute. Theoretically, any quarterback, stylistically can execute that style of offense. But you don't want to feel like your offense stops if you have to put your backup quarterback in the game. He's obviously not going to make Josh Allen plays, but you want to feel like you could still run the foundation staples that are absolutely essential to your offense. And don't forget, he's in it now for a second year, Brownie. I mean, that means so much. I'm not sure people understand that, with all the terminology, all the checks, all the audibles, everything that goes into it, calling 2 plays in the huddle. The mental part. I don't know if you guys got to watch quarterback, with Burrow, Goff, and Cousins, But in show 3, which I thought was phenomenal, obviously we did it here at Films. They opened show 3 with about a 5 to 7 minute thing of everything that goes on before the snap of the ball, and they ended the segment with Burrow saying, "And then you snap the ball." There's so much that goes on that you have to learn. So now, being in his second year, he's much better equipped to deal with that if he has to play.
So you got this crew, they just picked their 53, and the Bills, who had low expectations offensively going into last year with all the stuff that happened, trading Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
They bring in a guy named Mac Hollins, who nobody knew. Now this year they go with Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Tyrell Shavers, and Elijah Moore. It seems on the surface like this is an upgrade over where they were a year ago, at least at this end of the schedule. Now, last year, of course, they scored more points than anybody in the league. But
Yeah.
if there's an improvement here in this group, where could this offense go?
I think the big question is, who's the guy that's going to come in without wearing any shoes this year? Like Collins did.
Right.
But it's an interesting group because there's a couple of guys here that I remember that I really liked through their college careers and have sort of been a little surprised that it hasn't quite worked out. And, you never know why that's the case because I don't know the players. I don't know the situations. Elijah Moore, I liked him coming out of college. Josh Palmer, I really liked coming out of college. And I remember that year I happened to be out in California and I was visiting the Chargers training camp and was talking to Tom Telesco, who at the time was the Chargers GM. And we were talking about how much we both liked Josh Palmer's college tape. And, I've always thought he was a really good receiver. So, maybe this is the opportunity, obviously with the Josh Allen where he's going, not that there's anything wrong with Justin Herbert, of course. But, maybe this is the year that he becomes sort of I don't want to say a number one in the sense he's going to catch 120 balls, but where he becomes sort of more of that guy. Obviously, they're expecting much more from Keon Coleman. They traded up, if memory serves me correctly, to get him in the second round last year. They're expecting him to become a really meaningful player in this offense. We know about Shakir. I mean, Shakir is, to me, I've spoken to him about him since he was drafted from Boise. I'm sure you guys remember how much I liked him coming out of college. So I'm not surprised by his success in the league. I'm fascinated. I don't know at this moment in time how many snaps he's going to get in a game, but I'm fascinated by the Shavers kid because he's long, he's got stride length. He can run because of that stride length. You saw him make that catch this week. Not that you're going to make a phenomenal one-handed catch every week, but now you're dealing with a guy that maybe becomes a red zone weapon or a back shoulder weapon, or there's ways in which to deploy him. So I think that this to me is a really fascinating group that I think there's a lot there. You never know with guys that have been with other teams, but I think there's a lot there from a talent perspective.
Last one for me. Put your Kreskin hat on and tell me what you think might be tweaked or different in Joe Brady's team in light of what he has at his disposal. And I will tell you this, Greg, this offensive staff loves Jackson Hawes and his ability to block as a traditional Y tight end. So much so that it has me wondering if he's on the field more than we saw Alec Anderson on the field last year in those jumbo sets.
That's a great point because Jackson Hawes, the Georgia Tech kid, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did him. Yeah, he's a great blocker. I was trying to remember. Yeah, because now I've moved on from the draft, and so I'm trying to remember. He's your old school blocker, Brownie, as you just suggested. I mean, not that he can't catch a ball at all, but you're not putting him out there to be a receiver in the pass game. That's a great. Again, that's something we won't know until we get to the season. Maybe he's out there more because he still is a receiver. Obviously, Alec Anderson is not a receiver. So it's a different scenario when you do have a tight end instead of a sixth offensive lineman. And as you guys know, they played far and away more snaps with six offensive linemen than any other team in the league.
Yep.
So maybe there'll be a change there to some degree because this kid is a total dog as a blocker. But, talking about any tweaks offensively, I would think that they would love to see a little more verticality at times in the pass game. Again, that doesn't mean dropping back and just tossing it 60 yards down the field. But, so much of what happened last year, and maybe that was a function of the receiving core, because clearly Shakir kind of became the guy, and he's much more of a short to intermediate weapon, and that's his game. But I think they would love to be able to have a little more verticality at times in their pass game. We know the quarterback can do it. That's not even an issue. But every team wants explosive plays. That's all you hear when you talk to offensive coordinators is explosive plays. And I think that's something they would probably love to see more of. And I know they led the league in points, but every team tweaks no matter what they do the year before.
Greg, good stuff. Can't wait. We'll talk to you before the Sunday night game against Baltimore next week. Thanks.
It's a good opener, guys. We'll have fun next week. Thanks.
Yeah.